Several big news stories are about to break. Several are going on right now. To help me go through these, I have retired Colonel Tony Shaffer. Colonel Shaffer, thank you for joining me again.
It's always a pleasure, Stephen. I enjoy our conversations and I appreciate your great questions. So I'm ready to go.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. All right. So Democrats are mad at how well President Trump has closed the border. Nobody is getting into the country. They're
Correct.
also mad about how many illegal criminals, murderers, rapers that he's getting out of the country. They're even mad that he's standing up to Venezuela. Let me show you a clip out today from Senator Mark Wayne Mullen defending Trump protecting American citizens. And then we'll talk about this. Let me go ahead and roll that for us right now.
Talk about the whole picture here as a whole. Guys, I'm losing patience on the whole thing because I think it's ridiculous that we're having this conversation because underneath Obama, he had 500 strikes, 3,700 different individuals were killed. There wasn't a big show about this. What you guys are all upset about is the hemisphere that's working in. The hemisphere is these are drug terrorist organizations. The same people that Obama went after, some people we've been over for the last 24 years, were terrorist organizations that were wanting to kill Americans. There has been more Americans killed because of these terrorist cartels drugging our streets, drugging every one of your all streets, every one of your all's towns, every one of the audience's towns. They killed more people in 2024 on our streets than we lost in the entire Vietnam War for U.S. personnel. These are terrorist organizations that are poisoning our streets. The president has the authority to do so. The argument is it's too close to our shores. Does anybody doubt that these are terrorist organizations? Does anybody have a question about these being terrorist organizations? So what's the difference between Obama attacking these individuals when they were deemed terrorist organizations in the Middle East versus the ones that are here right now poisoning our streets? That's what the whole conversation.
All right. That's a great question. What? These are just too close to shore, but we're going to allow these people to kill hundreds of thousands of Americans. Your thoughts on that, and then we'll go into Venezuela.
So let's go through the legality first. And this is something I know a lot about because I actually worked at Joint Interagency Task Force East in Key West, JADF East, which is now JADF South, which was tasked to reduce and destroy drugs in the transit zone. That is the zone that we're now seeing in play, the Caribbean and Western Pacific. And for the record, we have assassinated drug leaders in the past. There's a book by my friend Mark Bowden. It's out there. I'd show a copy, except I haven't got my copy yet. I ordered it, called Killing Pablo, about the U.S. military, certain special mission units that I've worked with, working with the Colombians to assassinate Pablo Escobar. It's all documented, and it was completely legal. And so we've done it before. We've had an extensive investment, Stephen, billions of dollars going into mapping, tracking, and otherwise understanding the personnel and personalities of the drug mafia. We call them cartels, mafia. Now they're, I think, correctly identified as terrorist organizations, and they are. And that's why Senator Mullen is completely correct. The legality is bulletproof. Also, Senator, one of the other senators came out today out of Missouri, I think, I can't remember his name, said flat out that this is not a legal question, it's a political question, and the Democrats are questioning what's going on based on nothing but politics. And I agree with that. So if you establish the legality, which I think Senator Mullen does a great job of kind of outlining it there in a very layman's explanation, you go to what are we doing? Well, we're doing what we've always done regarding the tracking and disruption, except there's the added factor of lethality. Again, lethality has been used to a certain extent, but not to this extent over the past 30 years. So that's another difference, not difference legally, just difference regarding scope and focus, because as pointed out by Senator Mullen, we've been doing it overseas. I've participated in those strikes overseas a lot. I mean, it's documented, we've talked about it. There's a whole chapter on the lethal process in Dark Heart. So if people want to see how we do it, it's in there. Yeah, and most of it's unredacted, just saying.
Yeah.
So the predicate for the action, the legal predicates, the operational predicates, the intelligence predicates, it's all there. So with that said, then what President Trump's doing is focused beyond simply drugs. And this is why you see Democrats and, by the way, some of our allies screaming. The British have 19 possessions in the Caribbean. They're screaming about this. They don't like it. And it's called money. That's why they don't like it, because a lot of money has been going into these Caribbean countries, these Latin American countries, to include Mexico. Some estimates I've seen, Stephen, indicate that 40% of the Mexican economy comes from drug transactions. 40%. So the moment, and so yeah, so you have Democrats who are, have ties to Mexico, ties to Latin American and Caribbean nations, who recognize that if President Trump is successful, he's going to fundamentally change the economic balance in the region. Think about that, in the region. So it's not just about stopping fentanyl and other poisons from coming here. It's about changing the economic landscape. And that's what they won't talk about. And the reason they won't talk about it, because follow the money. You start looking at their transactions, who gets stuff. That's when it's going to be interesting. And I think we should do that. I think that's coming, by the way. Secondly, the British, a lot of those small Caribbean nations don't make all of their money from port stops of big old cruise ships. Although I'm just saying, again, a lot of these nations, small nations, have been depending on this illegal drug trade to help prop up their economy. That's where a lot of money goes. And oh, by the way, that money goes through these British protectorates to British banks in London. So the second target in this whole thing is the economics of the region, and more specifically, the British. The British are going to be very upset when some of this money stops coming their way. So many bankers, Stephen, and you're an economics guy. You can understand how you start screwing with large amounts of money at the international level, people are going to get really upset. And so that's why I think you see this massive move to include the British media, the European media, all being very critical of what we're doing. And again, legally, it's no different than anything we've done anywhere else on the planet. It's just the economics of it are what's really, I think, coming. Let me change the way I phrase that. The economics of it is what's really driving the counter narrative of the Democrats and the British and the international media. So that's what I think is really going on here.
Okay. I appreciate that. I read an article that somebody said, fentanyl is all coming up through Mexico, so why are we going after Venezuela? But then I read another article that said Europe is being overrun with cocaine from Colombia that comes up through the delivery channels of Venezuela. And so, we've got allies asking us to do stuff. I'm going to talk about the election situation down in Venezuela, but you talked about legality and lethality. Tim Burchett, a congressman that I really like, and others are saying every single strike that the Democrats and Rand Paul are crying about has gone through JAG, has gone through all the proper chain before a single trigger is pulled. Let me go ahead and show that to you in the audience, and then you can give me some additional insight on it.
Sure.
Hey, everybody. Tim Burchett, just leaving the briefing with Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio and military leaders about the legality of these strikes on these drug dealers that are pumping poison into our streets. I was glad to hear it. It's actually a three-tier system. Can't go into all the details, but every step of the way, there's lawyers making sure that what they're doing is legal. What the press isn't reporting is that there's several of these have just been introductions where they just seized the boats and the drugs and nobody got killed because one of those three areas was not did not fulfill that. So they just had to stop them. And guess what? Every one of them, they were carrying drugs, but they couldn't prove that they were part of a terrorist organization or otherwise. So I'm very very pleased. Oddly enough, I think they've killed it's less than 100 drug dealers or pushers or whatever you want to call them. In that, it's about averages. It seems like about a little over 3 people per strike. And and in that time, I just can't imagine the thousands of people that have lost their lives or had to get Narcan and go back. But anyway.
Okay, so that was really interesting. He said there's a tier. So everything that you guys are crying about, it's been through every single level. They have documented that this is a narco terrorist connected to an organization. They get the missile hit. Boom. If they don't, then they're getting the Navy or whoever right on their boat. They're handcuffed. The drugs are taken into possession. Right. And every one of these 80 that they remove them from bringing drugs, they're saving tens, hundreds, thousands of lives. Your additional information on what Tim Burchett said.
So for those who want to see what we're doing, conveniently, I wrote a book about it. It's called The Last Line. And so the tagline in the book is the drug war is about to become a real war. I think some guy who's the Secretary of War may have read it, just saying, maybe. And the idea here is that we have been contemplating, and Stephen, some of us saw this coming. I wrote this in 2012, 2013. We saw this coming because the trend lines were irrefutable. And so what he's saying, what the senator is saying, is that we have clear and utter proof and clear a lot of intelligence showing what's going on. And these are righteous strikes. Also, like he said, there's going back to my other book, because we actually do a chapter on the tiered system. There are tiers. He's correct. We talk about a lot about that in the book, because basically you have options. The president gives guidance. The Secretary of War takes that guidance, turns it into operational concepts. Those concepts then are given to the combatant commands, Special Operations Command and Southern Command, together working with the Coast Guard, because Coast Guard has the legal authority to do law enforcement, to include arrests. And it's that process that we're working through, and we're working through a lot. There is an operations plan, a full plan that's been approved. I can't tell you all the details, but I can tell you that it has been approved. It's been implemented. And everything that you're seeing here is part of a larger campaign plan, this military term, of how to go about reducing, and that's a term for destroying, the drug trade and the drug shipments coming in from Venezuela and other nations. It's not just Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, other nations is now being executed. And the president is very much aware of what he told him to do. And I think to the point, everything is, well, we can't reveal everything we're doing. I can tell you, based on my experience, everything they're doing is within the system of lethal authorizations, which have existed since before the beginning of the war on terror.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping me understand lethality and the legality. Let me get your thoughts on this, Colonel. So there is a massive buildup like we've never seen before in the Caribbean right now.
Right.
There's a lot of war power there, putting pressure on Venezuela. 17 nations, including the United States, believe that Venezuela has been rigging their own elections for this narco-terrorist group. They stole all the oil. They've put their people into poverty. We've also got the narco-terrorist drug situation for us and also our allies. We've also got information that they may be rigging elections in up to 70 different countries, including the United States. What is your take on this military buildup in the Caribbean? Are you still hunting for the perfect gift that actually blows people away? Well, I want to tell you about the wallet that I've been using. People ask me, what is that? I say, this is my wallet from the future. One tap and all my cards pop out. It's got a tracker, so I never lose it. And it's literally the size of your hand. It's not this old, bulging George Costanza from Seinfeld filing cabinet. And when my buddies look at it, they say, dude, that's really cool. But the thing that I'm telling everyone about this season is the travel pack vacuum bag. You stuff your clothes in, you hit it with a little pump from the mini vacuum, and boom, you can pack a lot in a little space. Now, recently, I packed a couple of days worth of stuff into a backpack. So I didn't even have to take a carry-on or big luggage. 0 bags checked, 0 fees, 0 stress. Now, Christmas is coming fast. This stuff is legit and it will make people happy. They're going to say, where did you find that? I absolutely love it. So I want you guys to head to the link down below and check out Exter. And while you're there, grab this stuff while it's the best price of the year. Up to 54% off right now, plus get an extra 10% off with code Steven10. You guys are going to love it. Go check it out right now.
So I think about 20% of our military forces are there right now. It's a significant amount. We have a carrier battle group and others prepared to strike. And I think what's going on is, again, three objectives. First, to put enormous pressure on Maduro. I think there's been conversations that President Trump's acknowledged regarding basically telling him to leave, telling him that he better, if he wants to see the spring, maybe he ought to be somewhere else. And it's possible. I'm not saying we're doing regime change. Matter of fact, Seb Gorka said on the record, we're not. I'll take him at his word. With that said, it's very clear that both political parties, for the most part, even the Democrats, up until Trump came in, wanted Maduro gone. Everybody agreed that the elections last cycle there, Maduro cheated. Everybody recognizes that. So a lot of folks, to your point, 17 nations are all saying, yeah, it's time for a change. Secondly, within the context of Venezuela being a jump-off point, there's clear evidence that Russia, China, Iran are all doing things from Venezuela to get people, items, all sorts of things into the United States via Venezuela. And that's not always from Venezuela directly in, but using Venezuela as a base of operations and getting things in. And for example, that tanker that was seized this past week, if you go back through, and a good friend of mine, Sal Mercogliano, does what's up with shipping with a question mark at the end. He does a breakdown of the ownership of the tanker. And it turns out, Stephen, to cut to the chase, that tanker was actually owned by a holding company. The holding company is run by the IRGC, the Iranians. It's an Iranian tanker, and it's been moving oil to profit the Iranians and Venezuela. To your point, on the backs of the people who should be getting the money. Instead, it's going to these terrorist regimes. So that's the second thing we're doing, is trying to figure out how we can start doing interdictions of some of these shadow tankers. And there's probably up to 500 of these things globally right now. And that's another valid target as far as I'm concerned regarding what we should be able to go after. But for the record, that tanker was not registered properly. It was not insured. It was not doing anything other commercial shipping has to legally have applied to it for moving oil. Just saying, it was a shadow tanker. And then the third, obviously, is, I think, trying to, as we talked about, disrupt the economic activities of the region for purposes of not harming the people, but trying to disrupt it to the point of where legal commerce is restored to those nations, especially Venezuela. Venezuela is one of the richest nations in Latin America. They have huge resources, more than just oil, and yet somehow the people are suffering. It's become one of the poorest per capita income nations, and there's no reason for that other than the fact that you have a socialist/communist government working with other rogue regimes to self-fund and destroy the lives of all the people who live in Venezuela and other Latin American countries. So there you go.
Okay. I want to make sure that I am never misleading my audience. I love my audience. I try to bring the truth on every video.
Absolutely.
I've been going down this rabbit hole with Patrick Byrne, Ralph Pizzullo, former CIA Gary Bernstein, Emerald Robinson, about whether they were using software to manipulate elections outside of Venezuela and possibly in the United States. Am I crazy, or do you know anything about Venezuela and election stuff?
So I think there's ample evidence of Chavez before Maduro that they were using Smartmatic and other machines. Now, I'm not making an accusation against Smartmatic or any machines. I'm just simply saying that there are allegations that certain algorithms, certain backdoors were available for manipulating the vote, and that's what I'm willing to say that there was evidence of that, and that goes back to Hugo Chavez before Maduro, and I think if you just go through each election and look at the results, there are legitimate questions regarding the outcome of the vote. Who voted versus what was counted, I think, is a significant issue that needs to be looked at, especially in this last election I've just mentioned, the one that Maduro supposedly won, which a lot of people feel was very clearly he did not win, especially when you start looking at the people who turned out to vote. So I think this is a valid area of investigation. I think President Trump and his team will be looking into this in some form. Beyond simply the military aspects of this, this is something that has to be looked at through the lens of Homeland Security, Central Intelligence Agency, especially NSA, National Security Agency. All these organizations are going to have to come together and start looking at this because I think there's going to be evidence found eventually that not only was there shenanigans with Venezuelan elections, I think there's a good possibility that something was done to our elections back in 2020 as well.
Okay. I want to ask you something. So I put out a video. It went viral, 425,000 views. Then people were passing it, and those ones were going viral about President Trump saying, keep your eyes open. There is truckloads of evidence coming out.
I've heard that phrase before.
Yes. Then you had Mike Lindell saying that he can't, to Alex Jones, I can't tell you right now, but something big is going to be announced in the first quarter of 2026 that will expose the elections. And President Trump has also, again, said, we're now finally to the point where we need to tell the American people. When he said truckloads of evidence, it reminded me of a past conversation you and I had where you were tasked with following up on this story of Jesse Morgan driving from New York in the middle of the night with a semi-truck full of pre-filled out ballots to Pennsylvania. And then that disappeared. And then suddenly Biden gets 700,000 ghost votes and wins Pennsylvania, and Trump loses the election. Is this a play on words, truckloads of evidence? I don't know, your thoughts on that.
So I can't speak to what the president knew when he said that. I can tell you this, regarding the Jesse Morgan thing, President Trump did watch the press conference I was a member of. As a matter of fact, he commented to a friend of mine, Shaffer ought to be in charge of the FBI, when he said that. Just saying. I mean, he watched the press conference where I talked about the pallet of ballots. And right after I did my brief, Jesse Morgan came up. This is still out there, by the way, Stephen. It's been buried, but all of this is on YouTube. You can track it down. My press conference, Jesse Morgan's comments, all still there. And to do a quick summary for your audience, I was brought in as a special investigator to examine the evidence of whistleblower who was Jesse Morgan, the whistleblower. He called the whistleblower hotline in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Republican Party passed it to me, and I was brought in as a special investigator. I was in charge of the investigative team. We had about 10 people working this with me. And during the first 2 weeks of December, we were able to do a detailed investigation. And the basic findings were this: Jesse Morgan made the claim, and we believe we validated the claim, that he moved a 53-foot trailer, one of those big old rigs, commercial trailers, full of what we estimated to be 640,000 curated ballots in what they call ballards, these big old boxes. And Jesse Morgan's testimony was they were already on trays, laid out, ready to count. And he moved this from Bethpage, New York, to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, on one of his overnight commercial runs. This is bulk mail, not your little local thing. This is bulk mail moving across straight lines. A full month, early October of 2020, on or about the 5th of October. Now that trailer got moved, and he was, after some shenanigans, when he tried to dump it off, basically put the trailer in to the bay where they normally put these things, he was told, stop, don't drop it here. And there's a whole range of things that went on. He talks about it in his interview. And the bottom line is he was told to drop the trailer in some off the grid location, which you never, these are controlled items, Stephen. These trailers are full of controlled mail. Mail is a controlled item. And he was directed against regulations to dump the trailer somewhere and leave it. This is never done. Ultimately, the postal system did an internal investigation. The IG validated everything he did. Too late, 3 years later. And that's the issue. What became of that trailer when he dumped it off a full 30 days before the election in Lancaster, Pennsylvania? And that's where that ends. As some of your audience probably knows, at the time I was trying to get additional investigative resources and expand the investigation to Bethpage and other places. A guy you may have heard of, Bill Barr, the Attorney General, calls me and says, hey, you're interfering with my investigation. What? Really? And you need to turn Mr. Morgan over to the FBI immediately. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. He needs to be protected as a whistleblower, and he has to have representation. And I was directed by Bill Barr, no, you will turn him over. And I said, no, I won't. Within a half an hour, I was fired. We kind of know how that happened, but I'll leave that for another day. We kind of know how that went through the chain. And God rest his soul, Bernie Carrick was the one who called me and fired me. Bernie later said, before he passed, I had no idea what happened. I had no idea they were firing you for you trying to do the right thing, because he was told he was lied to, like a lot of other people were lied to. Ultimately, Jesse Morgan was taken by the FBI. He was shoved off and ignored. They tried to basically trash Jesse Morgan, tried to discredit him, and that's where the investigation went cold. But yes, Stephen, I don't know if President Trump was talking about this issue, but I can tell you that a 53-foot trailer of curated ballots went missing 30 days before the 2020 election. Our theory of the crime, my theory is it was moved by other elements of the Postal Service who were corrupt. It was moved from Lancaster into one of the many post offices downtown in Philadelphia, sat there as a contingency. I don't think they were going to use it unless they had to. They had to because the numbers were so overwhelming for Trump. And at the appropriate time, they put the big sheets of paper over to hide the counting, and they dumped them in. That's my theory. And that's what I've stuck with, my belief based on my investigative predicates that I was able to get as far as I did before Bill Barr fired me. And that's all I know. So what do I think they should pick this up and look at it? Oh yeah. I think they should pick it up and look at it. Absolutely.
I've literally said prayers that this story be exposed, because I believe there's meat on that bone. So
do I, as the guy who was doing the investigation, just saying. So
yeah, I mean, you were on the trail, and then they removed you, and then they covered the trail with dirt, and then pretended that trail never existed.
Exactly.
So it does not look good. I am not a fan of Bill Barr. He threw President Trump under the bus many, many times. Colonel Shaffer, thank you so much for coming on. So much going on. I appreciate your insight on Venezuela, the election rigging. If people want to follow you online, where can I point them towards?
So ColonelTonyShaffer.com. We're actually monetizing my X. We're doing deep dives on Thursdays. We want to have you on sometime, Stephen. There's an invitation for you to come on and talk about some of these things. I've always been fascinated, and your audience knows this. I love the fact that you've been so direct with your audience. You just go to where you need to find information, you get it out to them. So I admire that. I want to talk to you a bit more about what floats your boat, and it's not a drug boat either. Anyway, and then we're doing a thing, the Sunday debriefs. We do a live show that people can join us if they're members. We actually do a deep dive with my friend Blaine Holt and Navy Captain Pete O'Brien to review the events of the past week and what to look for in the coming week. And of course, we do a free live show on Wednesdays with my friend Chris Cordani, where we just bring in our rock and roll friends. We have Shuri Curry and from the Runaways and Susan Olson from the Brady Bunch. We come and sit down and have interesting conversations about current events. So that's what we're doing via ColonelTonySchaefer.com. But Stephen, I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks again for having me and, of course, supporting me back in some times when they were pretty dark before we knew Trump was going to be here to start kind of kicking rocks over. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll put those direct links. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.